All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regularly scheduled council meeting for January 13th. I want to start by just acknowledging, as we do all of our meetings, that we are holding this gathering on the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish peoples, specifically recognizing the Lekwungen-speaking peoples known today as the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, and their historic connections to these lands continue to this day. And I also want to just point out that this meeting is live streamed and archived on the web for future viewing. Our first order of business tonight is minutes and reports. We have 4 minutes for approval here tonight, and I'm happy to do them one at a time or as a group if there's any changes, you see changes. So we can just do them one at a time and we'll go through them quickly. So if I could have a mover and a seconder for the Committee of the Whole for December 9th.
Move receipt of Committee of the Whole on December 9th.
It's moving approval. Sorry.
Move approval of the Committee of the Whole December 9th minutes, please.
Your Worship, it's move adoption, please.
Move adoption. Oh, not all of us are wrong. This is an ominous start to the beginning of the year. Yes. Moving adoption of the minutes. That's okay. Okay. Thank you. And seconded. Councillor Zelka.
I'll second. Thank you.
Okay.
And if I may?
Yes.
Thank you very much. It's more of a question related to the minutes, if I may, that may involve a change. I'm not quite sure. It does indicate on page 1, relating to the housing needs report, that the open house, point 1, by the way, at the bottom of page 1, that the open house is one of the things it'll be doing is to receive any public comments. But I did notice that in the public notification of the meeting, it indicated that the report was finalized. Is there any way that this suggestion of a finalization of the report could be corrected?
It's not in the minutes, so I don't think it would be a correction of the minutes. But for clarification of the public, I think it's the motion is not finalized until it is received formally by council, which has not happened yet. So that process, there is a revision to that report. I understand that, and that revised based on council feedback, and that revised report is going to the public input open house later this week on the 22nd or next week, on the 22nd of January.
I much appreciate that. And just to clarify, I did at one point hear a staff member indicate that this report had been received by council, and as mentioned in the minutes here, it actually wasn't. So I just wanted to make that as well very clear to the public that this report hasn't been received yet.
That is correct. So no, Ms. Varela, did you have a...
For clarification, Your Worship, it was presented to council, I think was the inference, so receive was not used in the procedural way, so staff's apologies.
Small r, not big R? Is that how that works? Yeah, fair enough. All right, so we have a motion on the table to, is it approved? No, adopt, thank you. I should have it in my notes, but I don't. To adopt the minutes. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, thank you. We have council meeting of December 9th.
I'll move adoption of the minutes for December 9th.
Second.
Moving second. Any corrections, changes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. And
I'll move adoption of Committee of the Whole held December 12th.
Second.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded.
And I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much. Related to these minutes on page 2, in the section having to do the comments that described part 2, schedule, location, and notice of meetings, et cetera, it indicated, it does indicate in the minutes that staff advised the bylaw with respect to a town hall that a council has the right of council to waive its procedures and suspend its rules at any time that council wishes to do so. Except I don't know how to do that. I was wondering if I could take this opportunity to say, how do we suspend our rules?
Okay. Ms. Hopkins?
Your Worship, that would have to be done through council resolution. So, for example, if we had an emergency council meeting that we had to call and there was a provision in the bylaw that needed to be waived to allow that to advance, we would take the motion from council at that time. And we'd have to meet the voting requirements that are stipulated in the bylaw.
Thank you very much. And with respect to a town hall, I presume the suspending the rules would allow us to have a free-form meeting of some sort?
Your worship, it would still be a committee of the whole, likely. So you'd still, it would be a special committee of the whole. So again, council can determine what format those meetings take, as you have in the last 3 that you held in 2019.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Any other changes? All right, we have a motion on the table. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. And
Move adoption of the special council meeting held December 12th.
Second.
moved and seconded. Any other discussion, corrections, amendments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Mayor's remarks, and I'll try and keep them short since I think nobody wants to get trapped here by the snowstorm outside. First of all, welcome to 2020, and note that there's a Lunar New Year coming up on January 25th. I want to just address the fact that we had some problems with our notifications of garbage and recycling pickup, and specifically that we failed to provide notifications that we changed the scheduled delivery process. So I just want to apologize on behalf of council and staff for that mix-up, and note that both staff and council will work to ensure that such changes have proper notification and are well advertised in future. And if anybody is still looking for one of those schedules, you can get them online. If you can't find them online, just call our office and we will find a way to get you one way or the other. Also do want to point out, we have 2 open houses coming up. One, as noted, January 22nd, which is the Housing Needs Report open house, or open house. And January 29th, we're doing an open house for the tree protection bylaw. So that'll be a chance for the public to weigh in on that as well. Looking forward to 2020, I just had a few comments. One, you'll probably notice if you've been here regularly that we have a different seating arrangement today than we had last year, and I'm going to make this change each year, just switching people around. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. One, so there's no sort of interpretation of seating. It was done in alphabetical order, now sort of rotated 90 degrees to keep that. There's no difference between being close to the center or far from the center or left or right. And it's just a way of just sort of making sure that everybody gets to see things from different viewpoints up here. I also just want to start this year with a little reminder. We have on our screens the Respectful Workplace. We talk about that a lot within council and with staff. And I just thought it's always worth kicking off a new year, just reminding why we're doing that. First off, we want to be open to all ideas from the public, which means we want to hear all the ideas. And to have that, that means we have to have a safe and respectful chamber so that people feel comfortable bringing their ideas forward to council. We want staff to feel comfortable and safe. We want them to be able to innovate and bring their ideas to this chamber, and that requires a safe and respectful chamber. We want innovation from our staff and from council, and that means that mistakes will be made, and we want to be able to openly acknowledge our mistakes, learn from those, and move things forward. And for that to happen, we have to have a safe and respectful environment to do that. And we also want to make sure that all points of view from council are heard every day that we're here, because unless we're all able to be heard and try and reach consensus, we can't make good decisions on behalf of the community. And for that to happen, we have to have a safe and respectful chamber. So that's the reason we have it up there, and I just think it's worthwhile just noting that at the beginning of this year. So here's to a great 2020, and we're going to get straight into our agenda package now. The first order of business is at all of our council meetings, we have a public participation period. This is a chance for anybody from the public to come forward and address council on issues that are of interest to them and related to council business. So if anybody wishes to come forward, you may do so at this time. I see a hand, so I will give a quick summary of what the expectation. If you can just sit down, if you could write your name, then we have a correct spelling for our minutes. And everybody coming forward will have up to 3 minutes to say your piece, and we have a total of 20 minutes allocated for this input. So welcome. Oh, we have to just push the button to turn on the microphone?
Talk there. Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Louise Lalonde, and I live on Estevan Avenue here in Oak Bay. And I just wanted to talk about safety for cyclists. And I think that had some interesting observations this last while. And maybe I should mention that I've been cycling my entire life. My husband, while he was working, cycled for over 30 years from here to downtown. And I think that there's been a lot of chatter about bike lanes and so on and so forth. And I would like to see council shift the focus away from bike lanes and think more about safety. Some interesting observations the other day. I was driving and it was gray, a typical January day, and some of the cyclists had lights on, which I thought, what a great idea. maybe that's a standard that we adopt down the road. Certainly cars are driving with lights during the day. The other thing is at night, I see a variety of things. Some cyclists have no lights, some have really good lighting, and some have flashing lights. So I think to that end, it would be really helpful to know what is the best approach. I brought my rear light tonight. I'm not going to blind you with it, but I think we've probably all seen the effects of driving down the road, whether you're walking, cycling, or whatever, and someone's got one of those high-frequency flashing. I'm not sure they're really that effective, and we tend to think of those as being reserved more for emergency vehicles anyway. So in summary, I think it'd be really helpful to see council focus more on safety. Even in a perfect world, if we had bike lanes everywhere, there are places where cyclists are going to intersect at intersections with vehicles. And if we can't see each other, and I think we all have a responsibility in that regard, the bike lanes aren't going to help. So anyway, so those are my comments. And I hope that it was interesting to hear your opening remarks about, innovation and whatnot, and I think it would be great for council to take up this topic with perhaps the City of Victoria, because I think there's ways that we can all be involved in being a bit more creative about how we're safe on the road. Thanks.
Thanks, Ms. Lalonde. Could you just write your name down so we have the correct spelling? You did? Okay, perfect. Multitasking. Welcome. Happy New Year. Sorry, could you just turn the microphone on again so we can hear you? There we go.
My name is Sharman Minus, and I live at Prospect Place in Oak Bay. I have just a couple of questions. One is about the special council meeting on Thursday. I was looking at the agenda, and there doesn't seem to be a public participation process. Is that correct?
That's correct. Only at our
Only
regular
at the
scheduled council meetings.
Okay. And the other is the council resolution tracking list that you have attached, which I just adore this. I love looking at this and what you've achieved. I was very encouraged to see that the HCA is sort of projected for the first quarter of this year, which is marvelous after nearly 4 years. And going down the list, I was looking at things. So item number 101, which is said it's completed, and it's that the owner of the property located at 1561 York Place be given an opportunity to address council regarding the temporary protection order at an upcoming meeting of council. Now, it says it's completed, so does that mean that the owner has addressed him, or you've invited him? Or I just wondered what the results of that might have been.
Sure. The offer was made to come to a council meeting, and I believe they did not come to that council meeting. But the offer was made, and that was a resolution of council, so it's being tracked.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Minus.
Hello.
Hello, welcome.
It's on, right? And I've written my name. First of all, I really appreciate the opening commentary about garbage and recycling, because that's exactly why I'm here. I sent a letter to both gentlemen of Public Works and copied all of you in. There's just so much confusion and so much conflicting information, and I just would like to talk about a few of those things. Now, for example, this whole business about the schedule not being mailed or hand-delivered or whatever we used to get. What's on the website is residents may obtain a card from Oak Bay Public Works or use the search tool above. So my concern is if somebody, and believe it or not, there are lots of people, especially in our demographic, who are not online. So how are they supposed to find out that they're supposed to either go online or go to Public Works? So is it not possible to maybe think about that in the future, that perhaps it's better to get the card delivered to people, because there is a lot of information on the back of the card that is important. And for example, the pickup, later in the spring, those dates have changed, of course. So to expect people to go online just doesn't seem fair. That was one thing. And then I went through the website and could not believe how outdated things are. For example, the first paragraph tells us that we pay $210 for our collection, but if we're on the kitchen waste test program, we pay $212, but we pay $250 now, and there is no more test program. So when I see things like that on the site, I really wonder, is it actually being updated? And you may know that there are a lot of people who still don't know they have to separate their glass. a lot of people. And I've met a lot of those people, and they're shocked, and some of them just keep doing it because they feel they haven't been given some sort of official, information. So, again, the back of the schedule tells you you have to separate, but the website simply has it under the blue box heading and includes glass bottles and jars within the blue box. So now we're saying you have to go online to get all your information. You're not going to get the card anymore. The card's actually right and the website is wrong. And then a couple of doozies. People want to know from prohibited materials on the back of the card, diapers are prohibited. They want to know where they're supposed to put disposable diapers. And I'm curious about animal feces because I have a cat and we've been putting our cat stuff into those compostable bags and then into our garbage. But if that is prohibited, which the back of the card says, where should I put it? Oh, my time's up. Okay.
Could you just read your name aloud so people?
Jennifer McLeod.
Thank you. And if you could just write it down, and you did already.
I did. I wrote it down.
And I just want to express, if you can have a seat if you want, but I just want to express my appreciation for writing that letter because sometimes these things do get out of date, and that helped us, and so that those updates are coming to the website, and I just want to express my
Okay.
appreciation for that.
Well, I'll just say quickly, under your frequently asked questions, it does talk about
Right.
animal feces being okay as long as you bag them up. So
Right. Thank
just
you.
like to see some consistency.
I know the curse of websites everywhere. Thank you.
Your Worship, members of the council, I'm back again talking about heritage.
Could you just say your name for the record?
Robert Craig,
Thank
live
you,
on
Mr. Craig.
Prospect Place in Oak Bay, and I'll do this afterwards because I might run out of time. When I was going over the agenda items for this meeting and the next meeting, I noted some things that caused me some concern. Item 5 today mentions the Heritage Commission meeting of October the 8th, which covers a number of things which need to be done to proceed with the HCA. Mr. Anderson said that the documentation to support the schedule of properties and what else they were doing would assist in the application for an official community plan bylaw. And I see that we have a draft HCA proposed OCP bylaw amendments, but and going through that, I wonder if that's specific enough, and perhaps we need an amendment, an addition to that. I also noted that staff recommended that the council receive the commission's minutes, but it says that these minutes are for information only. And then if you want to take action on any additional comments, you need to make a separate motion to do so. And I would strongly recommend, with due respect, that you do need to take some more action to accomplish the HCA this spring, which I hope is something that you have in mind. I do this because it appeared that there were no specific recommendations to council to bring it forward. Item 14, attachment 4. I read comments that additional resources, and I've heard comments that additional resources would be required to address new initiatives. And I note item 4, attachment 4, is about the Oak Bay Heritage Reserve Fund, bylaw 3352. It was a 1980s document, and at that time there was over $1 million in the fund. And my question is there enough money in the fund that some of the interest could be used to bring support to staff for working on this HCA? Now I understand, I went through that bylaw fairly closely, and I know that it reserves the use of the principal for land developments and other investments to augment the net present value of the principal. But it does precede that comment with a statement, with the exception of interest. So another in the 9 as whereas is in the bylaw,
I don't want to, we do have a procedure, but it doesn't allow for flexibility on the timing. However, the questions that you're asking, we'll try and get to in the course of the council meeting. But that's sort of where we're at this point.
But
We have 3 minutes per person.
I know.
Is there any other thing you just want to wrap up, or is it a list of
Yeah,
items?
there was something, it would concern me something, but it was on the next agenda where there's no public participation allowed. And it was attachment 4 in the new initiatives list, where the staff is recommending that you just reapprove the proposed strategy. And if you just do that, there are items 1 and 3 that cover heritage preservation strategy and the review and update of the policy and bylaws related to heritage.
So, Mr. Craig, why don't we leave it here, and you can
wrap it up.
okay. Just you can also send your comments to me directly as well.
I will do that. But it says that these items won't be discussed until 2023, which is like kicking the can down the road. We're already working on heritage, and we're already doing this. So when you do that, I would recommend that
Thank you, Mr.
just
Craig.
amend that.
I have to give time for other people to come forward. Thank you very much. Please do write down your name. You did ask a question. I just want to make clarification. You're right. The Heritage Reserve is strangely named because it doesn't have anything to do with heritage. It was named that really as a heritage of a specific land transaction. So we have not used that for other purposes. And just for clarification on process on the minutes, we would not normally do anything with committee minutes. The committee minutes are there just for our information. That HGA is going back again to Heritage for final consideration and recommendation. I believe tomorrow is their meeting, so it's continuing down that process path. It has not ended at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Would anybody else wish to come forward and address council? Councillor Zelke, you wanted to add something?
If I may ask in a point of procedure, with respect to the meeting that's coming up on the 16th, Special Committee of the Whole, I understand Committee of the Wholes in general are to allow a sort of a less formal way of having meetings. And isn't the public generally allowed to have
Correct.
input?
Yes, generally we do allow for public. Yes, Ms. Hopkins?
Your Worship, at Committee of the Whole, we allow public input on all of the agenda items. It's not a specific item that's listed like it is in council, where there's an actual public participation, but the chair of the meeting always invites public input.
Thank you, Ms. Hopkins, and thank you, Councillor Zelka, for pointing that out. So anybody who wishes to come on Thursday and address council, you're more than welcome to do so as well. However, I will always say sending questions ahead of time is helpful because then we can actually have answers for those questions and make sure that we're prepared. Is there anyone else who wishes to come forward to address council at this time? I don't see anybody else coming forward, so I will bring it back to our agenda. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming forward and talking to us about things of interest. We have up next on the agenda, item number 4, investment policy review. We have Mr. Payne, our Director of Finance here, and I believe our representative of the Municipal Finance Authority as well. So shall I hand it over to you, Mr. Payne?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And yes, I'd like to introduce Peter Urbank. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Municipal Finance Authority. We've got a strong history working with the Finance Authority, and we're very pleased to have done that in this case. Peter graciously offered to attend today's council meeting, so here he is. Thank you, Peter. So before you have a draft investment policy for consideration. The new policy expands the types of securities that staff may have the option of investing in, to including provincial bonds, municipal and regional district bonds, but more notably credit unions, term deposits, as well as new Municipal Finance Authority funds, which have come into being since the 2004 policy was adopted. So staff expect, if this policy is adopted by council, staff expect to be able to better align our long-term financial plan with our investment strategy. We plan on going into long-term financial planning in 2020, and we're getting a proactive step forward on this so that when the time comes, we can align our long-term investment strategy with our long-term cash flow needs. And we may have the opportunity to produce some higher yields as a result within acceptable risks. So the policy sets diversification standards to ensure that the district's portfolio isn't subject to unnecessary or excessive risk. In 2004, this was the last time that the policy was really considered and discussed by council. And council at the time expressed interest in understanding what risk the district would be subject to if it invested in credit union term deposits. And so I'm going to discuss that a little bit today. So there's a major distinguishing factor when it comes to investing in credit unions. And essentially credit unions, they don't have the ability to issue debt. So should a credit union have a liquidity event, they need some cash, the only way they can really raise that capital is by inviting deposits into their organizations. Whereas opposed to a Schedule I bank, they can issue a bond and they can sell it on the open market, and it's a lot more liquid that way. So the liquidity risk is higher with a credit union. And that, as is the case, this policy sets a 10% cap on investments in credit unions for that reason. And it also sets a 1% cap of the total net deposits of that credit union. So we don't want to own more than 1% of the deposits, the cash on hand, in that organization at any time. Now, credit unions generally come with some form of deposit protection in credit union insurance. The amount of that insurance varies from province to province. And in BC, it's a credit union deposits insured corporation. Their mandate is to insure 100% of all funds in their organization. But the practicality is if a credit union were to be subject to difficult financial times, the insurance corporation itself doesn't have enough capital to cover 5% of our largest credit unions. So in practical terms, that insurance is somewhat limited. There's no direct guarantee by the province of BC for those. So those are another couple of reasons why the investment policy sets some caps. So staff expect that if this policy is adopted, there's some opportunity for a greater investment returns while maintaining our main objective for preservation of capital. We've outlined some projections in the report between $130,000 and $300,000 under current market conditions. So if it pleases the chair, what I would like to do now is Peter Urbank has prepared a very short presentation and a couple talking points. And once he proceeds with that, both Peter and I are available for any questions that council may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, was it Mr. Burbank or Urbank?
Urbank.
Urbank, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Mr. Urbank.
Thank you. So we've just laid out here, first I just want to mention that in reviewing this policy, Director Payne had asked us to have a look at the policy that he and his staff had put together about a week and a half ago, and we're very pleased with what we saw. Although our job at the MFA is not to provide advice to local government, we're certainly willing to provide our opinions, and because we have backgrounds in investments, et cetera. So myself personally, I've worked in banking for my prior career prior to joining local government. So as per the Act, and what I wanted to say is that we're very pleased with the policy, and we're actually going to be using it as a template for smaller local governments across BC, because a lot of work went into it, and it seems to us that it has best practices built into it. So just on this page here is just the Act, Section 183 of the Local Government Act actually stipulates the types of investments that local governments can make. And so as Director Payne mentions, the last item, deposits in a saving institution, or the prior to last investments guaranteed by a chartered bank, are items that were added to the policy, but that were always contemplated in the Act when it was created. And so the provincial government does feel that these types of investments are of low enough risk that they make sense for local governments. Preservation of capital is always of utmost concern to whether it be provincial, federal, or local governments in their investments. They're not looking to earn 4, 5, 6% returns. They're looking to save their capital and invest in safe assets. This second page, it's very hard to see, I apologize for that, but it just shows how low interest rates are. So if you could see this, What you have on the bottom is what I would call maturity. So the x-axis on the bottom starts off at 3 months and then goes out all the way to 30 years. And then the left axis, the y-axis are interest rates or rates of return. So for example, 3-month securities are yielding anywhere between 1.5% and 2.2% these days. That would include, for example, deposits by credit unions. Here we've put lines out there showing you how the yield goes up as you take longer and longer bets. When I say longer bets, for example, if you buy a 10-year bond, you can earn just a little bit more these days than a shorter term bond, and you're taking a little bit of risk there because you're locking in that interest rate for 10 years. So in the current environment, it doesn't make a lot of sense to lock in rates for very long, and I don't believe actually those are some of the bets that Director Payne and your staff are looking to make. But this just gives you an idea of interest rates currently. This other piece here, I think, just talks about how the number one priority, the number one thing you want to think about before you create an investment policy and start investing assets is how long can those assets be invested for? Because the longer you can invest those assets for and don't need to pull them out of the investment, the more risk you can take without taking too much risk, in the sense that if you don't need the money for 5 years, you can invest them in a 5-year bond, which should earn you more than a 1-year bond, but you better make sure that you don't take the money out prior to those 5 years, because in between today and 5 years from now, the value of that investment will move up or down. But if you hold the investment to maturity, you can earn that higher rate without crystallizing that risk. And so that's in the policy, which I'm happy to say that part of the objective is to hold on to securities until maturity. And this is not in the policy, but Director Payne alluded to the fact that you need very good cash flow projections in order to invest in the first place and make decisions as to when you invest. Then the final slide, I'll just spend a second on this. On the left, you have what would be considered a very concentrated, risky portfolio. And unfortunately, many local governments in British Columbia have exactly that type of a portfolio. What they tend to do is they tend to put a lot of their money, or most of their money, in some cases all of their money, into financial institutions, banks or credit unions. And the reason they do that is they're earning a little bit extra interest relative to, say, a Government of Canada bond or a provincial bond or various pooled funds that MFA can create for local governments. And they're earning a little bit more but taking a lot more risk. On the right is a portfolio that's well diversified, so it invests money in banks, in all sorts of government securities from across Canada, and makes sure that those banks are from all across Canada. They're just not local credit unions or banks. And then if you can buy MFA funds, you will have even more diversification because you can buy corporate bonds of various corporate entities. So you have a very diversified portfolio. Again, the policy allows for this type of diversification, so we're very happy to see that. The final point I'll make are just a few funds that we have created for local governments. One of the funds that Director Payne referenced is this Mfa Mortgage Fund, or it's one of the newest funds that we've come up with. You can see that they offer higher yields than Government of Canada or Province of Ontario bonds or even corporate bonds, because that MFA Mortgage Fund, for example, will own first commercial mortgages that are managed by an asset manager. The key there, though, is you can only invest there if you don't need the money for 3 to 5 years or longer, but you can see if you're willing to put the money away for 3 to 5 years, you can earn more interest than you would in other securities. So those are the only prepared comments that I had, and I'll pass it back over to Director Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Urbank. Director Payne? Anything?
Thank you, Your Worship. We're available for questions if Council has any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Ney, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you very much, through you, Mayor, to staff for the report. It was very nice to read, and I found it, I'm not a finance person, but I found this very easy and accessible to read. It was very clear and helped me understand a lot of things. I appreciate the clarity around the risk and the ability to do diversification and other opportunities, and that we're going to probably make some more money than the way we've been investing. So thank you very much for that. A couple questions I have. well, no, actually, it's really one question, and I'm wondering. I mean, I fully support adoption of this policy when it comes time to do that. But I am curious about any value statements around environment and climate change, and I speak to this point in the context of a large number of banking institutions and education institutions are working towards divestment of fossil fuel companies. And it's relevant to this organization as we've declared a climate emergency. And obviously it would, perception is that it's hypocritical for us to be investing in those companies that are emitting the carbons. And so I'm certainly not going to let this get in the way, but I really would be interested in understanding the approach to that. And I did actually also find a report that UBCM did back in 2016 to address disinvestment from fossil fuel companies. And in that day, I mean, now we're talking, it was probably done 5 years ago because its date was 2016, so they had done the research prior to that. They did not recommend it. But neither did all these institutes who are currently, there's really an acceleration of adoption of that kind of a policy in investment portfolios. So I'd be very curious what staff's views are around this issue.
Mr. Payne?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And that's an excellent point, Councillor Ney. Thank you for raising that. The current investment policy is a little bit rigid because it actually defines the Municipal Finance Authority funds which we may invest in, and which really eliminates our options for other Municipal Finance Authority funds. The Municipal Finance Authority did attempt to create a socially responsible investing fund, which they're not moving forward with due to a number of difficulties. But they are planning on putting together a fossil fuel divested fund, and so this renewed policy would allow us to invest in that. Our exposure to fossil fuels is limited depending on how deep you want to analyze that connection, because we can't personally invest in corporate bonds, but we can invest indirectly in corporate bonds through the Municipal Finance Authority, which is one reason why they've created this fund. Did you want to?
Yeah, I just want to add a few comments. So that's absolutely right. When this UBCM 2016 report came out, we were also being asked to create funds that were socially responsible. And we surveyed all local governments, and back then we only got out of $12 billion of reserves managed in the province, a grand total of $68 million of demand for that type of a fund. So it's very expensive to create. And what we said at the time was if we can get $100 million worth of demand, we would create that fund. Since then, a lot has happened, and you're absolutely right. The winds of change have moved. We are absolutely have approached our board. We can't say anything public at this point, but I'm very confident that within the next few months we will have not a socially responsible fund, but a fossil fuel free fund. There's a distinction there, because even this idea of fossil fuel free, it's a definitional problem. It's very hard to sort of decide what is fossil fuel free. So certainly most people would define it and say an extractor of fossil fuels, a pipeline, those should be excluded. But what about an airline or a car manufacturer? So there's this definitional problem. The way we're going to deal with it is we're going to use a third party to basically define it for us. We won't even allow a discussion around the definition, because that would be interminable. But I'll point out a few little things. There are many options where you can invest in socially responsible way through MFA or directly with credit unions. So if you're buying a large chartered bank, most people feel that that is a fossil fuel-free investment. Now, the only issue with that is the bank then takes that money and may lend it to a fossil fuel company. If you're buying a credit union, though, credit unions lend really in their local to mainly for mortgages locally, not to big companies. So you can feel more comfortable in a credit union that you're making a fossil fuel-free investment. I'll just point one last thing out. If you buy a Government of Canada bond these days, they, unfortunately or fortunately, the way you look at it, own a pipeline. So should you now not be able to buy Government of Canada bonds, which are in all of our funds? The mainstay of any pooled fund is a Government of Canada bond to add safety, and then you add things around it. So anyway, it's a complex question. I am happy to come back to council because I've done a lot of work around socially responsible funds and fossil fuels. It's really something I can talk about for a long time. So I can talk with you individually or where you want to, but we will have options that are out there. And currently there are plenty of options that Director Payne and his team can pick that you may consider to be socially responsible or fossil fuel free.
Just one
Councillor
quick
Nick, yeah.
follow-up, Mr. Mayor, to staff. I just thank you very much. That's reassuring, and I do appreciate you acknowledging. I recognize the complexity, but I'm just wondering if, when the time is appropriate, that could come back to council so that we could reconsider. I mean, you know, what that would look like, is because from what I'm understanding, things are in development and they're ready to come forward, but it's imminent, but not yet there. So I just
Correct.
like to say that out loud. I'm not quite sure how to, you know, confirm that, Mr. Mayor, but
I'll just, if I may, actually, there's the simplest way may just be to, at the conclusion of this, make another motion to bring the issue of ethical investment back here, probably just in a year's time. Would be a logical time as we're going through this. And I say that it's a little longer than is possible here, but I can tell you that other entities, particularly the CRD, are going to be looking at this and bringing their expertise and much larger staff to the fore, and we'll do a lot of research. And I'm sure we can get a lot of bang from just waiting till that report comes back to that board and using that as an assessment piece.
If I just may
Mr.
mention,
Bank?
to be clear, the way the policy is written currently, as soon as we create that fund, which I'm telling you I'm very confident we will have something, you can invest in it immediately. There's nothing in this policy that precludes you from doing that. It's just that the policy doesn't state it's something we prefer to do, right? Some local governments have gone to that extent where they've said, whenever possible, we want to invest in a socially responsible fossil. So I haven't seen this in this policy. I would frankly recommend against it until there are more of these products created. But currently, nothing precludes you from investing in that fund when we bring it.
Thank you, Mr. Bank. Councillor Patterson? I'm just trying to, I'm going to remind everybody, we're going to try and do questions at this point, and then we'll get commentary and things as we have a motion on the table. So trying to keep the focus on the questions at this time. Thank you, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm delighted that we have a representative from the MFA here tonight, so I would like to take advantage of that opportunity, if I might, just to expand a little bit beyond the boundaries of this policy, although it reflects back on it. My question is that, as you pointed out, there are financial managers that are dealing with other institutions to reap incremental increases in their portfolios. Having moved here from another province, I found the model of the MFA funding for municipal capital projects to be a very interesting model. It is, and I think most people in BC are not, they don't really realize that this doesn't exist anywhere else in Canada, and it really provides low-cost borrowing to municipalities. So with this direction of some financial managers to move away from the Municipal Financing Authority deposits, can you articulate in some way how that trend may impact on the MFA's deposits and its borrowing and its lending capacity for municipalities in the future?
Mr. Urbank?
Thank you for the question. So I'll just make a distinction here. We have two main businesses. One of them is borrowing and then lending to local governments. As you point out, Councillor, it is absolutely a very unique thing we have here in BC, and not many people know about it. We are, by far, can provide local governments in BC the lowest cost of funds relative to any other local government in Canada. We do that not just because the interest rate at which we borrow is lower, but the costs associated, legal costs, fees with banks who have to place their bonds are far lower on a per dollar raised than any other local government. The other part of your question where you talk about deposits, I just have to correct you in saying that we don't take deposits themselves. It would be that reserves that are managed by local governments get invested through us and through our trustees and through our funds. And you're absolutely right. There is a lot of competition out there from many brokers who push certain products. I'm not happy. In some instances, I'm very happy to see it because people should have choices in terms of where they put their money. In many other instances, some of these brokers, or most of these banks or brokers that are selling these services, of course, have profits in mind, whereas anything we earn comes back to you. We are owned by local government, and we have we have the right sort of moral approach to everything we offer. All we are trying to do is save taxpayers' money. That's our only reason for being here every day. I'm not very concerned that funds being offered by others will impair our ability to run our business. If anything, we've done very well over the last many years, and although we do have ourselves taxation authority, so you may not know this, but one of the ways that we borrow money so cheaply is MFA-BC appears on the tax roll of every piece of property across the province. So if we ever got into trouble or got impaired, which we never have, we have the right to impose taxation on every piece of property in the province. That's why, and then we have other things like joint and several liability between local governments, et cetera. I can spend hours just on this topic. So we are a very safe organization. I'm not very concerned that we're going to lose, but what I would say is every chance you get, Councillor, thank you for mentioning what you mentioned, that you come from another province. The more you can talk about the benefits that the MFA offers, the more we have the ability to offer products that are for the benefit of everybody, and the more we can help grow our, what you called a deposit base, but it's really our pooled fund products, because it's for the benefit of everybody. Have I answered your question? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And also appreciate you not talking for hours on that. As interesting as it is, I think we'd all like to hear it, but we have other business to get to as well. Councillor Patterson, was that the extent of the?
I have more questions, Mayor, but I think perhaps they might be better waiting until we actually get to discussion on the motion itself.
Sure, thank you. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question to take advantage of the MFA representative here. Thank you very much, Mr. Urbank. With respect to the question of divesting for carbon concerns, I know in the past there was a lot of focus on, for example, fossil fuels in particular, or actually naming what the offending item might be, and then it sort of shifted over to socially responsible, and now sometimes it's called ethical. And then lately, with the work of the now soon-to-be former governor of the Bank of England, they're focusing more on climate stress testing. I was wondering if you could just give us some advice on some wording we should use to give us the greatest flexibility, where we could actually take care of being responsible and at the same time not tie ourselves into a corner.
Well, that's a big question. So what I would say, well, first I should mention this. The asset manager that manages most of our funds so we don't manage those in-house. They're managed by a professional asset manager out of Vancouver called PH&N. They are signatories to the UNPRI construct. So it's the United Nations Principles of Responsible Investing. So every fund they manage for us are managed with those lenses in mind. Now, you can't call them socially responsible funds just because they have those lenses. A socially responsible fund will, by definition, pick, typically they'll pick 17 United Nations aspects of socially responsible investment. So, for example, you want to have companies that have good governance, companies that have good representation for women on their staff and on boards. You want to have companies that don't use child labor. There's 17 of these items. You want to have companies that have low carbon footprint, et cetera, et cetera. Most people will adopt those definitions because they're becoming a little bit more standardized. However, if you adopt all 17, it starts to really complicate the investment process, and that's why we're going to for our first fund, we're going to go with a very simple definition, and we're only going to pick low carbon footprint, or that's what we're going to call it, a fossil fuel free fund. So I can't really answer your question now because I'm actually on a board of a company that represents bond investors across an organization called the Canadian Bond Investors Association. We're struggling with that very same idea. We're trying to standardize these definitions because if you don't have good standard definitions and report under those definitions, it's going to continue to be sort of a dog's breakfast as it is today, where all the different banks are selling products and they're really making up the value of those products. They're just saying, well, our product is better than that product. And, you know, Van City has some very good products. They're an example of sort of a not-for-profit financial institution that has good products, so I look at their products. But the large Canadian banks and many of the brokers don't have that same social lens that a Van City would have, because they're sort of not really a profit-oriented organization. So I can't really fully answer you, but over time we'll have better recommendations around the definitions to use.
Thank you, Mr. Bank. Councillor Braithwaite?
Thank I think that my question perhaps was answered already. It was around the deposit insurance or the insurance that the MFA would have. But from what you've said, you would just add a tax onto each household, just as a municipality would raise money by adding onto their taxes as well.
Correct.
So the rest of my my comments will fall after we have a motion on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, I just have a couple of simple questions. I was just not having that in-depth knowledge of investments, I'll say that up front, but the threshold of like the triple B investing and recognizing that there's limitations on that, but as an adjustment of risk, where does that actually, what does a triple B in layman's terms mean in terms of an investment risk?
Okay, well, so a credit rating, which triple B is, so AAA, MFA is AAA, that's the highest credit rating. The Government of Canada is AAA. The lowest credit rating is D, default, means you haven't made your payment on a bond and you're no longer solvent. So triple B is somewhere in the middle of the categories of ratings. You go from AAA, AA, single A, triple B, on down to double B, et cetera. An example to sort of illustrate it, MFA would be a AAA financial institution because we have taxation powers. Government of Canada is AAA because if they needed to pay back a bondholder, they can print money, right? So you're going to get your money back when you buy an MFA bond or Government of Canada bond. A good example of a triple B bond would be a small credit union. Because they don't have as much staff, because they don't have because they only have deposits from customers to shore themselves up. As Director Payne said, they can't go to the capital markets and borrow money if they got into trouble. You're at a higher risk. There's a possibility that they may not be able to pay you their interest. So all that rating shows is the risk that you won't get your interest paid to you. Another way to look at it is if you look at all bonds out there over a 100-year period, and don't quote me on these percentages, but it gives you an example. If you looked at every AAA bond over 100 years, 0.1% would not pay you over that 100-year period, whereas maybe 3% of the BBB bonds would not pay you. So that it's the risk that you won't get your interest or principal paid back over time.
Okay, thank you very much. I won't hold you to those exact numbers, but I get their point. In fact, I think all my other questions really have been answered to my satisfaction at this point anyway. So with that, we're just, Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Mayor. If I could just ask a question on the methodology by which we are reviewing some of these policies that we have. I find it difficult to be looking in isolation at an investment policy without understanding what the borrowing policy is and the reserves and the financial statements. So if perhaps through you to staff, at what point does all this coalesce to provide a greater understanding? Because I do find it difficult to look at one piece without the entire picture.
That's a great question. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Director Payne.
Thank you, Worship, and I echo that sentiment. You'll notice we're working our way through all these finance policies and at a fairly good rate. I'll give you a little preview of the financial plan that we're putting together. There is a financial policy section that really encompasses brief description of all the policies and how they work together, and there you will see how they should work together. Tonight's sort of a prime example. I decided it was important to adopt a new investment policy, but I couldn't do that without also looking at the reserves, right? So that's a prime example of how all these policies must work in lockstep. So to answer your question, the financial plan will have a good inventory of all the financial policies and how they work together, but it will also become obvious in that inventory which policies need to be updated as well.
Okay, thank you. And just timelines for that. When is that coming? That financial plan piece.
Our statutory deadline is May 15th. You'll see it, February 6th is the first budget deliberations meeting, and council and the public will have access to the first draft of the entire financial plan, and in there, it'll have it in there.
Very good. Thank you so much, Mr. Director Payne. All right. I would, well, we have two motions here. One is to, can we do the repeal and approve at the same time so we can just have questions and comments on both together, or would you prefer to have the repeal and the approval done separately, Ms. Hopkins?
Your worship, I think you should do them as separate motions.
Okay, then I'm going to just allow for, I don't want to call a question on repeal if there's going to be, if there's significant concerns raised at this table. So I'm going to actually just allow a commentary at this point, and then we'll get to motions at the end of that. So if there's any additional commentary, we'll take that, or Councillor Braithwaite, you can start.
Thanks so much. So I'm actually really thrilled to see this document come forward. When I first came on council in 2006, I was actually working for Coast Capital Savings at the time, and I asked the question every time we had budget, how come we're not investing through a credit union? To me, investing through a credit union, you're supporting something that's local. I do hear what you're saying as far as the liquidity risk. However, I don't think, well, I can't think of a credit union that's gone bankrupt within British Columbia in the past 40 years. I don't think, I could be wrong, but I can't think of one. And we're really fortunate in British Columbia in that I believe we have 3 of the top credit unions in Canada that are basically within British Columbia. So to be able to show some support locally and invest through those credit unions, I think is a wonderful thing. So thank you for bringing that forward. I also want to compliment Mr. Payne because I believe it was said that this document is going to be used for best practices. That's going to be used for other local governments. So I think that's a real feather in your cap, Mr. Payne, and I thank you for that. So when this comes on the table, I'm going to be supporting both motions, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
You don't have your hand up. Councillor Patterson, you did indicate you might have some more questions as part of the motion process.
I do have a series of questions, some of which, admittedly, I have shared with Mr. Payne in advance because I thought it would be good to give some thought to the questions. Many of them are around really more governance and policy than the specific policy that Mr. Payne has drafted, because I share Councillor Braithwaite's remarks about the policy itself. I think it's well documented. It's clear, it's concise, very user-friendly, easy to understand. But some of my questions are more around the governance of this. I can, to a certain extent, understand why previous councils did not take advantage of market timing to, through investing and staggered expiry dates to take advantage of a better investment strategy. However, I do keep in mind that we are a small municipality, and the previous methodology to managing finances was very simplistic. It didn't take a great deal of financial acumen to manage it reasonably and risk-free to residents. And while certainly we value having Mr. Payne with us, playing devil's advocate, if Mr. Payne was not here, would the resources that we have difficulty managing this? Because we are a small municipality and we only have one real
I'm going to turn your comment or general question into a more specific question. What is the level of in-house expertise required to manage the pie chart with lots of options in there, to manage that effectively at this table? Because it's absolutely reasonable to ask that question. So what skill sets are required at our table?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's an interesting question because certainly even among finance professionals, our designated accountants, our level of familiarity will certainly vary. I will say, though, the community charter designates the finance officer as responsible for investing the funds. And our professional ethics for chartered professional accountants require that we perform our duties with a duty of care and prudence. However, part of those professional ethics is recognizing when we don't have the professional expertise to carry on and to seek that expertise. That's a professional responsibility that chartered professional accountants have. The policy itself provides a framework to mitigate the risk of someone investing in a reckless way. The community charter itself already provides some strong parameters to mitigate the risk that investments happen in a reckless way. This further structures that with a diversification, the diversification limits. So I'm not sure if that specifically answers your question, but I think that's the best I can do. Oh.
I'll just add one little thing. I would absolutely agree that so the way this policy is written limits certain riskier investments quite dramatically. So we saw that example of some local governments put everything into financial institutions and they don't even diversify within. I've come across a local government. I was flabbergasted. They had more than your local government has. The entire half of it was a deposit in their local credit union with 2 branches. Makes absolutely no sense. I think they were 15 to 20% of the entire deposit base of that entity. Very dangerous. Now, Coast Capital, Van City are large entities, so it would take, we did the calculation, you could invest the entire thing in Van City because 1% limit, the 1% of Van City's deposits would be about $60 million, which are the investments you have. But I wouldn't do that because then you have it all in one entity. So if you lost Director Payne one day and you realize that your staff didn't have as much expertise, frankly, they can just put money into MFA pooled funds, which by their construct have hundreds of securities and are instantly diversified. So that pie chart on the right that had all those different things, not that complex because they can buy a few of those pooled funds that have all of those slivers built into them. I know, Councillor Patterson, that you have a good background in the investment industry, I can tell. So you'd be effectively buying a mutual fund at much, much lower fee that's instantly diversified. So I think there's ample room. I like the way this policy was written, and I think I don't foresee big issues in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Urbank, for the clarification. Councillor Patterson?
If I may, Mayor, I have a few more questions. Under the policy 2.2 and 4.4, so we're talking liquidity and cash, could we get an explanation on, we've got Mr. Horan sitting directly beside Mr. Payne, and Mr. Horan has certainly on many occasions pointed out to the to members of council the condition of our municipal assets. So how does the condition of the municipal assets establish a basis for making decisions about liquidity and establishing contingency?
Mr. Payne?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So this all goes back to our objective of developing a long-term financial plan that really looks at when our infrastructure is expected to be replaced. And as the time frame moves closer to when that happens, the need to have that liquidity goes upward, right? So the idea is to align those two. And you need to have enough of a contingency such that if your estimate of when an asset needs to be replaced isn't accurate, you still have access to those liquid cash. But the idea is sometimes we're going to put in assets that have a very long shelf life. PVC pipe can last 100 years, 120 years. If we put that in tomorrow and we're saving for the replacement of that pipe, it's very unlikely we're going to need those funds in the next 5-10 year frame. But once we get closer to the 70-year time frame, we want to ensure that our investment portfolio is liquid enough so that we can replace those assets. So to answer simply, we simply match the liquidity of the investment portfolio to when the assets are being replaced.
Councillor Patterson?
Thank you. Just following to that then, if as our Director of Engineering advised a couple meetings back that we are actually, a lot of staff time is now being taken away from scheduled maintenance to do repairs because of the state of the assets. So proportionately then, how do you manage for, because we don't have all of the documentation of the rates of that, how will you set that limit to cover breakdown?
Mr. Bean? And I want to make sure that we're also spending some time on questions that will make a difference about approving the policy, because I think these are fascinating questions, but I also want to make sure that we're using our time here wisely. So if you can answer that, Mr. Payne.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and I would be tempted to have this conversation go on into the evening, so I appreciate that. First of all, our operating budget is what generally Mr. Haran and this district has been using to cover unexpected breaks and what have you. So our operating funds are always liquid. They always have to be available. We have approximately $50 million budget that we need to have the funding available for annually. So there's no question about that. Really what council and staff need to be aware of is when we have major capital expenditures on the horizon and the time frame required for that. And so those capital expenditures are funded strictly from reserve, and those reserves need to be appropriately liquid at the time when we need to expend those funds.
Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Mayor, and I beg Council's indulgence. But there are things, and well, normally if I represent Oak Bay on the board of Crest, and I am also on their finance committee, and so a lot of these same questions are ones that the finance committee would ask of the financial officer and the operations officer, and so I'm being diligent also in going through that in this, and so hopefully you can bear with me. The return on investments, can you give us an idea on how you will be reporting the performance of those investments to council, both for short-term and long-term?
Mr. Payne?
Thank you, through your worship. There's a place marker for it in the 2020 financial plan, so we'll be reporting on the annual investment dollars return, the annual investment return dollars, and the annual investment percentage. So both in the financial plan and the annual report. Mind you, we want to make sure that that doesn't induce us just to chase yield. The diversification is also important, but those two performance measures will be in the financial plan.
Thank you.
And through you, Mayor, I'm not certain who answers this, but hopefully a member of staff will. Does the district have an established procedure to authorize and report on emergency expenditures?
Mr. Payne?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, actually, it was adopted in our most recent procurement policy, which authorizes emergency expenditures under certain conditions.
Thank you.
Councillor Patterson?
Does the district have a fraud risk strategy?
Mr. Payne?
Your Worship, not that I'm aware of. We've got a whistleblower policy, not quite the same thing. And we've got some internal activities planned, but not a fraud risk strategy, certainly not written.
Just there is a audit process that we follow every year. Is that the extent of the review, Mr. Payne?
Yes, Your Worship, and actually you're touching on one of the questions that Councillor Patterson I anticipate is going to ask around internal controls.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Patterson?
Yeah, just to clarify, I guess drilling down a little bit into that. If staff's primarily responsible for design, implementation, maintenance of internal controls, there can be a risk of overriding those controls, and so, it's what basis do we drill down to look at that in a more fulsome way, because an audit quite often will not pick up on that the nature of that type of action.
I'll take that as a comment more than a question, but just for clarification, that level of piece would not normally be part of an investment policy. That would be probably more of a financial oversight policy. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Worship. The scope of the audit includes testing of internal controls. Councillor Patterson, right? That doesn't mean that they can catch all instances of internal controls being overridden.
Correct. Thank you. Councillor Patterson, did more questions?
Thank you, Mayor. I will leave it at that, but I do have concerns about the lack of policies for risk management, and while I know that that is not in the all in the purview of Mr. Payne, he's dealing with the finances. I think that it is something that is of concern because we don't have a real methodology of how we deal with that around council to go into these things in depth. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. And I believe that is that focus of making decisions based on risk metrics is part of our process going forward, but it's nascent at this point. I think it's probably the best way to describe that. Ms. Vrell, do you want to add anything to that, or is okay? Thank you. I don't see any other questions. I'm happy to take a motion.
I'll move the recommendation that Council repeal the District of Oak Bay Investment Policy 2004.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Patterson opposed. And another motion?
Then I'll move that Council approve the proposed investment policy 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? Discussion? Councillor Zelka, yeah?
Well, there was the question outstanding as to whether we'll be doing any further work, or at least putting a placeholder for the ethical investment or fossil fuel-free item. I don't know whether we want to address that tonight, or whether we want to wait for the climate action folks to possibly chime in on that, or whether we'll wait for MFA. I just don't want to lose it.
It's fair. I will take that direction from council, but at this point, I'll deal with the motion. If someone wants to make a follow-on motion, we can deal with it then, or under new business, or at a future time by council. So we have the motion on the table. Councillor Braithwaite?
Just a comment, just to follow up on that. I think what I heard from over here on this table was that that's something that is in the works, and that's something that is considered on every investment as much as possible. Is that not what we heard over here?
Through Your Worship, what was stated is that the fund was most likely going to be created very shortly, and we would not be precluded from investing in that fund. But that doesn't mean that council has an opportunity to have that discussion about prioritizing such investment.
Oh, wrong button. Sorry. Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you. I'll leave my comments. Yeah, Councillor Name.
Sorry, just a question then in the context of this discussion. Then, I mean, if we adopted this bylaw as is at a later point when this investment has been developed and formulated, we could then bring the policy forward again and have a discussion about whether we want to fine-tune that policy at that point to give more direction about more focused, to have the discussion at the council whether we want to.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right, so seeing any questions, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Patterson opposed. Thank you very much. And unless there's a motion to give a specific date for that, we'll consider that at council's discretion in future for consideration of the ethical investment portion. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Urbank, for your attending the meeting tonight. It was funny. My very first question I had was, how do we assess this policy? And just, I would say that having Municipal Finance Authority reviewing it and here to answer questions went a long way to making a comfort with the change in policy. So thank you for attending. Item number 5 on the agenda, we have a Heritage Commission meeting held October 8th. This is a motion to receive.
Move receipt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Item number 6 on the agenda, just for clarification of people following along on an earlier agenda, this was added as a later agenda item, just advisory design panel minutes dated November 5th. And then need a motion to receive.
Move receipt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Item number 7, advisory design panel meeting held December 3rd. Again, motion to receive.
Move receipt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Advisory planning commission meeting held December 3rd.
Move receipt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. And community climate action working group meeting held December 3rd.
Move receipt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Item number 10 on the agenda, we have Verizon report from the December 12th, 2019 in-camera meeting. This is just the advisory body appointments that are now public. There's no motion required for this, just so it's on the public record. The website has been updated as well. Item number 11, council resolution tracking quarterly updates. We have 3 different pieces here, but I would just ask our Chief Administrative Officer, Ms. Varela, to give a quick overview.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is part of staff's commitment since this council took office over a year ago, that we track all of council resolutions. Beyond the tracking, those resolutions are either actioned, they're referred to a future process, or they're repealed. Staff has 2 requests for repealing of council resolutions tonight, and there are memos before you. The first repeal is council's direction to draft a permit and/or license category and fee for bike share businesses that reflects the cost to the district for providing the necessary infrastructure and enforcement related to this new business category. The business operator did not pursue the business license or an operating agreement, and as such, staff are anticipating that there won't be a need to action this at this time. So we're hoping council will repeal that. The other item is that we look to repeal resolution number 57, instructing staff to provide recommendations at a future committee of the whole on potential scope and associated costing of further traffic analysis related to the Carnarvon Park Master Plan. The discussion about the Carnarvon Park Master Plan and the traffic analysis, we didn't have the benefit of having the Director of Engineering in the room for that discussion, and in subsequent conversations at the staff level, we've decided to bring it back to council, answer any questions that you might have with the benefit of the Director in attendance. Beyond that, then, we would ask that council simply receive the council resolution tracking quarterly update for information. And again, what you'll see on here is when it's been completed, you will see complete, and then the next quarter that we present to you, that item will have dropped off. So there is a master document with everything since council took office, but again, for the sake of the agenda package, we provide you with the current updates. We anticipate that later this week, the list will be up on the website, both the master list and the abbreviated list that appears on the agenda. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Varela. Are there any questions of staff at this time? Councillor Zelka?
Thank you very much, Chair. I very much appreciate this list, and thank you so much to staff for helping us all stay on top of the motions and approved items that we are bringing forward. It's great to know that things aren't being lost. I do want to ask a question, though, about those items that were approved by previous councils. And in particular, one that came up recently, I'll sort of just focus on it because it actually came up during the public participation with respect to cycling safety, bike lanes, move the emphasis maybe from bike lanes possibly over to safety. And that has to do with the speed study that was approved in Committee of the Whole on December the 5th, and then it was approved at Council and endorsed on December the 12th, 2016. And I do note that we've had a chance to see how that approved speed study, which basically approved the 40 kilometers throughout the entire Oak Bay, with the exception of certain arterials, has been referenced by our Director of Engineering with respect to some work being done in some areas. So I wanted to ask, at the very least, whether this item could be added, since it is an active item that has been approved by Council and appears to be sort of in motion, but I would defer to staff whether they would could possibly comment on that as to the status of maybe at least that one, and then also what the procedures might be for other ones, other items from previous councils that are still technically active.
I'll go to Ms. Varela, and I think it would probably be a resolution of this table if we want to direct staff to go farther back at this. But Ms. Varela?
Your Worship, I don't have the benefit of having those resolutions or how they read in front of me. When Council does make a request of a resolution that predated myself, I guess, since we put in the tracking, staff can do the necessary research to bring that back. But again, those weren't being tracked. So we do rely on Council for something that went as far back as 2016. The Director might have an update on this individual item, but overall that's how we would approach resolutions that happened before Council took office. This tool was only put in place at that time.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Zelko.
Before hoping that the Director of Engineering might make reference to this, I do note that in October 2019 he sent a lovely email providing a lot of the background on this material with respect to this, how the speed study ties in with a fair bit of work. I apologize, I'm potentially putting the Director on the spot, but I was hoping that item would have shown up on this list, and when I unfortunately late in the process noticed it apparently missing, I wanted to at least have a chance to talk to it.
I just want to not go down the path of us starting to ask a bunch of questions on things on this agenda item that were not on this list, because staff probably aren't entirely prepared for it, and that one has been provided as an update from staff. Not that I'm going to preclude it, but I just want to not open the floodgates here where we spend the next 2 hours remembering things. So with that caveat, I'll just go to Ms. Varela.
Ms. Hopkins and I were just discussing that as a best attempt, perhaps when Council brought a question like this forward about a particular resolution that went back multiple years prior to this tracking tool, that perhaps we could add something at the end of the list for that. So if something's brought to our attention, we'll find a way to feed that into the process based on best attempt for solutions.
Through you, Chair, thank you very much. Something like that would be very helpful to know that that we have these items that are hanging out there. They're technically still active, but I appreciate knowing that there is an opportunity and an opening to get it onto this list and ideally move forward. I do look forward, with respect to cycling safety, this already approved item moving forward in ideally a sooner instead of later way. Thank you.
And I don't want to ask the Director to kind of bring up the actual original motion, but if staff is amenable, I think adding that to that list as a piece, I'll put it at the bottom of previous ones. I think that we can do that. And I also think it's also that is still a very open file. As you recall, at the last meeting of last year, we did a resolution to support the letter from Saanich asking the province, who had declined to change the Motor Vehicle Act to allow for speed limit changes at a municipal level, to ask them. And so it is still an active resolution process. And in fact, that will be on the list for follow-up. Ms. Varela?
Just clarification, I think, Your Worship, for perhaps those people looking in. It's not that resolutions that predated this council taking office haven't been actioned or may not be currently being actioned. It's just they're not part of the tracking mechanism. So our commitment is that every single resolution council has put forward since it took office is tracked. So we'll start adding them on, the previous ones on, as council brings them to our attention.
Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite and Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, I just wanted to talk about the repeal of the resolution for the bike share operators. I just wanted to ensure through you, Mayor, to staff that if this did go forward and it was repealed, that it doesn't preclude us from coming forward at a future date with another resolution if another organization proved themselves worthy of doing something like this within our community.
Ms. Vrilla?
Absolutely, Your Worship. It does not preclude council taking any future action in that direction.
Thank you. I think this really just stops staff from actively working on this file until there's a need to work on it. Ms. Patterson, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor. Last January, you brought forward a resolution to council for council support to for Oak Bay to send a letter to basically Saanich, and that we would support them in applying for a grant which would be managed by Saanich to investigate the status of daycares and the number of spots. I think that is something that could have some implications, be interesting information to have for the housing plan that we're working on. So I'm just wondering if there is any update. There was also going to be an opportunity, or you had hoped to have an opportunity for Oak Bay residents to also give some voice to whatever the study was they were doing. I'm wondering if there's any update.
I don't have a specific update other than I think about 3 months ago they gave a general information that they had an RFP out for a consultant to kind of guide that process. I don't know where it's sitting at currently, so I don't know. Perhaps we could just ask in the next update, or if you wish, I can just do some research and try and bring it back to council.
Just to follow up, maybe that is something that we could just add to this. I mean, it wasn't something for our staff to do, but I don't want to lose it. I think it's something that we do want to keep tracking in some way.
Your Worship, if it is a staff action that council is looking for with regard to that, then we would request a resolution that staff conduct research and bring back an update to council.
Yeah, this is just the province had a grant application that you got the grant if you asked for it, and so it's sitting. The resolution was to go to use Saanich, who is going to compile all of the willing partners and do a joint application to look at the regional needs. So I think it would be more just a question of looking back to make sure that that's on the list so it doesn't get lost by this council. So if we could just add it as a...
So to be clear, if it's going to hit the tracking list, it has to be a resolution. Okay. So if it's intended to be a more informal request, perhaps the councillor could send me an email, and then I could bring back an update to council. But anything that's on the tracking list is based on a resolution.
Fair. Sorry, I think for clarification, Councillor Patterson was pointing out there was a resolution that predated this council that made that request to submit it to Saanich. How about we just leave that one offline for the time being? Let's make the request directly of staff, and we can add it to our list through resolution at this table if we want to.
That would be fine, Mayor. I do think it's relevant to our housing plan.
Okay, thank you. We'll just leave it for the time being. We'll just get an answer on where it's sitting at before we do any other action for tracking. Thanks. Any other comments, questions at this time? Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff. I'm not sure who to direct this to, but I just wanted to ask a question about the bike share operator work. And this may be a difficult question to ask, but how would staff characterize the level of work that's taken place to this point? I don't know whether there's really a percentage that could get associated with it, but I'd just like to get a sense of at what stage that work is.
Was that to Mr. Haran? Would be the best person to ask that question of? Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Haran, Director of Engineering.
Through Your Worship, a good chunk of the work that was done by staff was published as part of the reports that were done around changing the streets and traffic bylaw to add the definitions and the draft of the operating agreement for the trial program. And then the follow-on work was the council's resolution around finding a fee and permit structure. That would have been it's difficult to assess. We didn't get far along in that process because our discussions with the bike share operator that was going to do the pilot project kind of broke down, and so the back and forth discussions kind of stopped, and then so we just got focused on other things, and then situation was overcome by events as we went through the summer. So there's some work that would have needed to be done with a specific bike share operator that would have done a pilot project to come up with what is a reasonable as a negotiation for what infrastructure, fee, permitting structure we would have in place to do that. So it stopped before we got to that point. I'm not sure if I've answered the question well there, but.
Councillor Appleton?
Thank you. And again, through you to staff, maybe just as a follow-up, is it fair to say then that it's not possible to respond to the council resolution without having a prototypical bike share operator in order to work with to develop the standards? Or is it possible for this to be amended such that we could create something that was potentially created general content that would be applicable to any bike share operator?
Mr. Horan?
Through your worship, it's certainly possible to do that. Staff's approach was to just with, as we're stretched thin with multiple priorities, it's a matter of saying, as this one fall enough down on the priority list, that we didn't want to leave it hanging as a resolution that wasn't finished. And then in repealing the resolution, but agreeing, as we've discussed tonight, that the council's intent is, as this kind of issue comes forward in the future, the council has directed that there would be a new fee structure for a bike share operator. So if that was to occur, we'd be able to revive that work, and we would be required to bring it back to the council to say, this is how we were going to do it with this new bike share operator that wants to do a pilot program.
Councillor, okay. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Mayor. I have one more item on my list, and it was something coming out of a resolution when council passed the resolution for the community amenity contributions recommendation by staff. Staff did indicate that they would be coming back with a report by year end on community amenity contributions, where we stood about the program. So again, this isn't on this list because it's not technically a resolution, but I'm just capturing it to see that it will be there will be a report of some nature. I don't know when it comes, if it will come for our strategic planning or if it will be coming for budgeting, but perhaps we can get clarification on that.
Mr. Anderson, and
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Patterson, it was that a year upon adoption of the policy that we would have a look at that. So I believe it's the spring, April, that we would be looking at some kind of review. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Not seeing any. I just would like to express, as we go to these votes, I think sometimes it's hard to take things off of lists because they were put there for a reason, and I just really appreciate the fact that we have a tracking system. I do agree that starting at the beginning of our term is the easiest way of doing it, and it gets very muddy if we start trying to pick another random date and not necessarily have all 100% of the information. And this way we know we have 100% of the information. And I do, well, it doesn't look good on paper to rescind something on bike share business. This really was specific to their business plan, and we needed to make sure that it worked for their business plan and without any applicant. Trying to do that in the dark, guessing, and obviously that business plan didn't work very well. Trying to guess what the next one would look like is difficult. So I think taking it off now and moving it forward makes a lot of sense. We have 3 recommendations. I think we'll do them separately. So if people want to move those, we can have discussions on each one individually.
I'll do the first one if you like. I move that council repeal resolution 04 directing staff to draft a permit and or license category and fee for bike share businesses that reflects the cost of the district for providing the necessary infrastructure and enforcement related to this new business category.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second.
We've seconded. Any other discussion? Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. And just in response to the comment that you just made, I have to speak against this motion, and I have to respectfully disagree. The idea and the structure of bike share, this particular bike share business that we're discussing here, has obviously had some issues with implementation, and I want to fully recognize the issues that staff have identified in working with the provider in trying to come up with a workable solution. That said, a bike share operation will come to Greater Victoria in short order. This is a system and an approach that is common to all well-provisioned cities with good infrastructure. I've encountered and used systems in a lot of cities across Canada, and once you experience sort of the simplicity and ease of use of some of these systems, you start to recognize how important they are for mobility in a city. So I would prefer to see staff continue with the work that is there and explore options for creating content for these guidelines, which is more broad and broadly applicable, rather than being focused on this one specific operator. So I would like to see us get ahead of the curve here and have that ready for when this bike share operation does manifest itself, because I'm confident that it will. So I won't be supporting this recommendation.
Thank you. Any other comments? Not seeing any. I just want to express my appreciation for Councillor Appleton for your comments on this. I think all of that makes a lot of sense. I think the problem that we seem to struggle with this one is that every operator operates a little differently, and so putting permits if people want municipal space or don't want municipal space if they're free roofing or things. Those are the things that we were trying to source through with the previous operator, and I think it's hard again in the vacuum to come up with a good permitting or costing system that works for everyone. But I totally respect if the council wishes to keep it moving forward. The staff will do their best, obviously, in that situation. The motion, however, just to be very clear, is to approve the repeal of that resolution. So just so we're voting in. A vote in favor is a vote to repeal. A vote against is to vote to not repeal, because sometimes it's almost a negative vote here in this case. So with that, the motion on the table is to repeal. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? One. Councillor Appleton is opposed. Can I get a motion for repeal of resolution number 57?
I'll move that council repeal resolution number 57, instructing staff to provide recommendation at a future committee of the whole on potential scope and associated costing of further traffic analysis related to the Carnarvon Park Master Plan.
Moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion on this? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. And the final resolution to receive the tracking?
I'll make the motion that council receive the council resolution tracking quarterly update for information.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Councillor Zelka?
I understand that, it's not, there hasn't necessarily been an amendment, but I understand that what we're receiving is something that might be slightly different, since there's a suggested change that would be done from staff with respect to making room for new additions in the future. I just was wondering whether that needs to be part of the motion or not.
In my opinion, it does not need to be part of the motion. The receipt is as it is, and then we will make amendments for future versions. Thank you. So with that, we have a motion on the table. Is there any other discussion? Questions? No? All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Item number 12, we have new business and verbal reports. Under new business, I'll start just by stating that for the record that our Councillor Braithwaite will be absent from our chambers for a number of months, starting at the end of March, beginning of April, and for some time period upwards of 4 months after that. And perhaps I'll just give it to you, Councillor Braithwaite, just to explain what it is that you will be doing.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, my husband and I have decided that we would like to take some time to hike the Pacific Crest Trail, which is a trail that goes from Mexico to Canada, and it's about 4,200 kilometers that we will hike with a backpack on our back, and we'll be sleeping in a dirt motel every night. So that's going to be very interesting. It's something that has been on our bucket list to do for a number of years, and last year we unfortunately had a lot of things happen within our family, deaths of close relatives and friends that kind of put things into a different perspective for us. And being as my husband is 63 and I'm 60, we decided that this was probably the right time for us to try and take a few months to go and do this hike. And it's a good time to be away from council, I think, as most of the things that we've been working on will be done before I leave, as far as budget, etc. goes, and then there's not a lot happening over the time that I'm going to be gone. So council was kind enough to give me a leave of absence for 4 months, and I will be blogging about my hike, and I'm also going to be doing it as a fundraiser for the United Way and the Sovereign Order of St. John, because I thought that it would be good to have a purpose along with doing the hike as well. So I will give more information on how people can follow me on the hike as we go. We leave at the end of March. So thank you, Council, for indulging me in this.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I just want to make sure we don't record their ages on the minutes, if that's is that a courtesy to her husband. A report on the Capital Regional District. I just want to give a heads up. I reported on this at the end of last year that there was moving forward with expanding or adding funding for the regional housing strategy, the Housing First and other supportive housing and affordable housing initiatives. So there was a goal of building 2,000 new units regionally. That was required $90 million. That was approved a few years ago. That's moving forward, but with the inflated cost of land and building, that number of reaching the 2,000 goal does not appear to be in check. So there's going to be a request. There's been a bylaw passed at the CRD, and it'll be coming to this table for consideration by this council in terms of whether or not we would support the CRD in borrowing another $10 million. So they've previously borrowed $30 million towards that. And are looking for another 10 to meet the goals set out. So just heads up that will be coming. There'll be a report attached, I believe, at the next council meeting for consideration. That's it from the CRD's perspective. Oh, sorry, another new business. Sorry, my apologies. We'll skip back to other new business. Is there any other new business of Councillor Appleton? You did signal to me before the meeting you did.
Sorry,
notice of motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to make a notice of motion that I'll be bringing a motion to the next council meeting with respect to receiving council's approval to placeholder some budget line item or some budget allocation for recommendations that may come from the Community Climate Action Working Group.
Thank you very much, Councillor Appleton. And appreciate that you're still into working, so it's hard to have an exact number at this point. So I appreciate trying to find a process that allows us to work within that. Any other new business? Not new business. Okay, then we'll get to other verbal reports, and I'll start with Councillor Braithwaite. If you want to go around, this is a chance for Council just to talk about other items that have happened.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to let you know that we had an AVICC meeting on last weekend, I believe, and there was a report on that I'm going to share with Council from oil spills on our waters along our coastline, and how we can get some money for help to clean up the shoreline. So there was a report on that I'll actually forward to you, Ms. Varela, and you can disperse it to the rest of the staff. And there was a call for resolutions and nominations for AVICC, because the AVICC convention will be held in Nanaimo from April 17th to 19th this year. So hopefully all of council will be able to make it there. And then lastly, I just wanted to let everybody know that a date has been chosen for this year's Yes Awards, which will be February 27th. And I hope that all of council will be able to make it. You'll be getting a placeholder for your calendars. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Councillor Appleton, did you have anything to report on?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just very briefly, attended Greater Victoria Public Library Board meeting on December the 10th, just after our last council meeting. The agenda was fairly light in keeping with its festive pre-Christmas nature. But we did say thank you and goodbye to a few outgoing board members. So there will be some new board members arriving, and will be oriented to the next meeting in a couple of weeks, in the January meeting. So there's been some turnover on the board, and when those people, when I know who those people are, I will report back to council.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. No updates at this moment.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to bring attention to a member's bill put forward by an MP from Mr. Viersen from Alberta in the House of Commons on November 14th. It's a bill, Bill 47, about violence against women and youth. And in his presentation to the House of Commons, he attributed the good work done in advocacy by the Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee in BC, which is quite unique in Canada. The other provinces don't have that, and I bring that forward because although it happened before my time, the district of Oak Bay was one of the 3 originals that helped fund that committee get established. And although now is funded by the other members of the CRD, certainly Oak Bay had a leadership role in that. So I think it was worthy mentioning.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Not a big budget either, I will say. Councillor Nady, do you have anything to add? No. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. We'll move on then to resolutions, and we have a previous notice of motion that was brought forward by Councillor Braithwaite about the possibility of joining the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. This is your motion, so if you want to maybe make the motion, and if we have a seconder, we can speak to it.
Sure. Thank you so much. I move that the Corporation of the District of Oak Bay apply for membership with the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce for the years 2020 to 2023 at a maximum cost of $3,700 annually.
Is there a seconder?
I'll second it for discussion, hoping that Councillor Braithwaite will motivate.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Indeed, that allows Councillor Braithwaite to motivate.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this actually came to, I think the mayor and I had a meeting with the chair of the Chamber of Commerce about a year ago or so, and they were asking if Oak Bay would like to join the Chamber of Commerce, and they gave us a lot of information on what the benefits were for that. Some of the benefits that you would see would be a better rate for credit card transactions. There's good savings in. I think there was a whole bunch of information in the package that they gave us, but there's good information as far as how we can advertise through the Chamber of Commerce for things like staffing within our municipality. I know that Saanich and Langford have just joined, and Colwood is just going to be joining as well. There's just a lot of things that staff and council can take advantage of. So like I said, advertising for positions, there's interesting meetings to attend, very good guest speakers to be able to go and listen to. I think upcoming is Minister Ralston, who is Jobs, Trade and Technology, and next month they have the CEO of the BC Housing Corporation. So there's lots of different benefits, and like I said, pricing on credit card transactions, savings for gas memberships, ability to advertise for openings, etc. So I know a lot of organizations have joined the chamber, and I've seen a lot of benefits that have kind of filtered through the organizations, and I just think that it would be and looking at the other municipalities that are joining, I think it would be a good thing for Oak Bay to be on board with that as well. And I'm not sure, Mayor, if you have anything to add to that.
I guess no, I don't. I have a question, but I don't have anything else to add to the conversation. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. I want to support this, and I do note in the report that senior staff have signed off on it as concurring. I was wondering if possibly Director of Finance could speak to some of the benefits as mentioned in the member value statement and by Councillor Braithwaite, as to whether we actually could take advantage of some of these benefits, please.
Mr. Payne, have you had a review of the application process or the benefits?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm afraid I haven't had enough of a review to answer that question at this time.
I'll go back to the motivator, Councillor
Actually,
Braithwaite.
I think that, and that's probably something that we should have ensured that we could have had happen. I know that the Chamber is very willing to come to a future meeting and be able to talk to us on that, and perhaps that would give Mr. Payne an opportunity to have a look at some of those benefits as well. So that's fine. I think if we want to have the Chamber come and present, that's okay too.
Councillor Ney?
Just a quick question. So I'm not sure how this works. So we buy this membership for the entire organization. And so does that mean every staff member has access to all these discounts and savings? So what happens? They've just informed that this is, how does that work?
Yeah, so every staff member becomes a member of the Chamber through the District of Oak Bay. So that would mean that Ms. Varela, for example, could take advantage of any of those discounts or services that the Chamber offers, and as could any member of the staff of the District of Oak Bay.
Okay, and just a follow-up to Councillor Braithwaite. So in addition to discounts and savings, there's other values. I've always understood the Chamber as being a sort of bringing together community to support business, and I get the ecosystem of business. It's not just business, it's government and citizen groups as well. So does that enrich our networking in any way with other districts, or like what other kinds of benefits around that objective of this?
I think that from what I've seen through my business with the Chamber, which would be through the organization that I work for, it is a very good networking opportunity, and it does bring people together from many different businesses to come together and share ideas and learn from each other. And I think that maybe it would be good for the Chamber to come and give a presentation so that maybe you could have a better understanding of it, because I don't work for the Chamber. This was something that they brought forward and asked us to perhaps consider, as many of the other municipalities are considering. So they're more than willing to come and be here to speak to this.
That may be a good idea for us to do that. What would be the process, though, for us to do that? Would it be to have a direction here to table this and make a request of the Chamber to attend a future council meeting? Would that be the process best followed? Ms. Hopkins?
If that's council's will, yes, we could certainly do that. We could table the item and wait for a presentation from the representative from the Chamber of Commerce, and then have council continue their discussion and decision making.
I think it would be a motion to refer probably to a future council, or defer to a future council meeting. Would that be the terminology?
Yes,
used?
Your Worship, that's correct. You should refer to a future meeting of council.
Okay, and I think the other question that I would have, if I may just interject a question, which is the primary question I have, is that one of the key benefits was that the transaction rate for credit cards is a discount. I know it's certainly a benefit to many small businesses where they don't have access to that reduced discount. It would be good to if we could also have the information about what their rate is versus what we're currently getting, because I think that would help inform. There may actually be some direct cost savings if that pans out, or it may not.
And if I may, I think that was one of the main intents that I had on suggesting this, because the number of transactions that we have that go through our Parks and Rec and Culture department is astronomical. And so if there could be a savings there, then I was hoping that would offset the cost of the membership.
Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Mayor. Just in coordination with inviting the Chamber to come and make a presentation, the membership fee, of course, it reflects the size of our staff in Oak Bay and the benefit to them. So I think that while coordinating them to come and speak to council, it would be also helpful for members of the staff to be well represented when that presentation is given, so that they can also we can get feedback from our own staff of how that might benefit the staff also. certainly with attendance through meetings, any synergy, attending guest speaker sessions, anything like that, anything that will help us make the decision. Thank you.
I think, in my opinion, I think Ms. Varela's role here would be essentially to make that determination of the value for staff. And I'm going to hold you on the spot at any point to do that. But if I'm listening to this, I think the motion would be to, if that's the will of council, to refer this to a future council meeting, invite a representative of the chamber to address council at that meeting, and in between ask staff to compare our current rate of transaction rates to what the chamber is able to offer. So we have that hard data available as well. Does that meet the needs of the...
I think that catches it. Okay. So do you want me to make that motion?
Please do.
I will make that motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I just want to make sure, I hate saying that motion. It always makes me cringe. Is that motion captured, or Ms. Hopkins?
Your Worship, I have as a draft motion, so please refine if necessary, that we refer this item to a future council meeting and invite the Chamber of Commerce to present to council and ask staff to compare current transaction rate with what the Chamber of Commerce can provide.
I think that captures it. All right. Is any other discussion? All right. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. And thank you, Councillor Braithwaite, for bringing this forward for conversation. For consideration. Item number 14, we have our poor audience here waiting for this one item. Our development variance permit application DVP 00095 2643 Cavendish Avenue. We have this, and I still believe to this date there's still been no feedback for the public call. Oh, Ms. Jensen, sorry, I'm looking in the wrong direction.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, notification went out on January 2nd. We've received no feedback.
Okay, thank you very much. We have it at this table. I will ask any member of the audience who wishes to speak to this item, is welcome to come forward. No, you don't have to come forward. Yeah, if there's any questions, we can ask that of the applicant. Are there any questions of the applicant or of staff? Seeing none, then we have a suggestion motion in front of us. If someone would make that, we can talk to the motion.
Yes, I will move that the Director of Building and Planning be authorized to issue development variance permit DVP 00095 with respect to 2643 Cavendish Avenue as appended to the Council agenda of January 13th, 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Sitting through that meeting to get to your one item, but our process as we follow it. We have item number 50 on the agenda, October resolution adopting minutes. So this is a late agenda item, and this is a housekeeping piece that was Ms. Varela. I think it deserves a little bit of an explanation so that council has some understanding of context.
Thank you, Your Worship. So at the October 22nd, 2019 Committee of the Whole, Council sitting as committee made the following recommendation: that it be recommended to Council that the proposal to construct a single-family home and an accessory building containing an indoor swimming pool at 3470 Upper Terrace Road, as outlined in the October 3rd, 2019 report for ADP 00108, be denied as to the uplands siting and design. Subsequently, at the October 28th meeting of Council, Council ratified that recommendation by adopting the minutes. Subsequently, the district has been challenged on this practice of adopting recommendation in the meeting minutes, and therefore we're requesting that Council consider the following resolution as a housekeeping item. One thing I do want to note is that this has been considered in the procedure bylaw that we're currently reviewing. Right now, that procedure is endorsed through that bylaw, but we want to make sure that we clear that issue up. So tonight we're saying, whereas council resolution meeting, we're at the regular council meeting of October 28th, council adopted the following resolution: that council adopt the minutes of the council meeting held October 15th, 2019, the special council meeting held October 17th, 2019, and the Committee of the Whole meeting held October 22nd, 2019. And whereas the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held October 22nd contain a record of the following resolution having been adopted, and I'll read that aloud for the benefit of the gallery or those at home, that it be recommended to Council that the proposal to construct a single-family home and an accessory building containing an indoor swimming pool at 3470 Upper Terrace Road, as outlined in the October 3rd, 2019 report for ADP 00108, be denied as to the upland siting and design. And whereas the procedure bylaw, 1999, provides in Section 9 that a recommendation of a committee shall take effect upon the adoption of the minutes of the committee by the council. Now, therefore, we're requesting that council hereby confirms that by adopting the minutes of the committee of the
Ms.
whole...
Roll, I'm going to ask one of the members of the council to read out the resolution itself.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else you wish to add?
No, Your Worship. Again, it's treated as housekeeping, and we do anticipate clearing this item up in the next procedure bylaw, but we just want to make sure we're really clear on this item. Additionally, if the applicant was in attendance and they wanted to speak to the procedural issue, they should be invited to come forward.
Thank you. Just in case they are here or hiding around the corner, I will make formally the request of the applicant. If they wish to come forward to address council at this time, you are welcome to come forward and address council. Seeing no one come forward, we will bring it back to this table. We have a recommended resolution in front of us. I think the best process here would be to read that resolution, and then we can have comments to it, if someone would so do so.
I say that therefore council hereby confirms that by adopting the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of October 22nd, 2019, and in accordance with Section 9 of the Procedure Bylaw, council accepted the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole and thereby denied the application referred to in the Upland Siting and Design application ADP 00108 for the property at 3470 Upper Terrace Road. And for greater certainty, council denies as to Upland Siting and Design the proposal to construct a single-family home and an accessory building containing an indoor swimming pool at 3470 Upper Terrace Road, as outlined in the October 3rd, 2019 report for ADP 00108.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or questions? Yes, Councillor Zilka.
Thank you, Mayor, and please forgive me. I know nothing about this particular item, but I would like to know whether this is something that's being requested by a higher power, or whether this is something we're doing for greater clarity, or whether are we being ordered.
Ms. Varela, can you explain the motivation for bringing this forward at this time, given this is our standard practice, is just to adopt?
Certainly. So this is the district standard practice. We did receive a challenge on this process, and so we are hoping to clear this issue up as a housekeeping item.
If I may, this resolution essentially solidifies at the council table what was done through adoption of the minutes of the Committee of the Whole.
That's right. It's council reaffirming its intention. So basically pulling that recommendation out of those minutes and treating it as a standalone.
Is that clear enough? Okay. Any other discussion, questions?
Yes, I do have one more.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
A question to staff. The new procedures bylaw, how will it change this process going forward, please?
Ms. Rella, subject to us, in its current draft state, perhaps the best way of answering that question.
Staff will be pulling recommendations out of minutes, and those will be addressed as standalone items.
Thank you. Any other? I'm not seeing any. We have a resolution on the table. I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. We have the item number now 16, the Reserve Bylaw Review 2020. And I believe this would go to Mr. Payne for comment. A lot of attachments.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I do believe, though, my presentation would be a lot more succinct than the attachments would suggest. Staff have prepared a draft reserve bylaw 2020 for council consideration. This bylaw would repeal all of our existing reserve bylaws, consolidate them into one. Essentially, the intent of all the bylaws, the previous bylaws that are proposed to be repealed, have been retained in the draft bylaw, except for there's one substantive change to note, which is that the alternative transportation infrastructure reserve, as well as a village parking reserve, has been combined along with their balances, and that's in response to legislation that was passed a while ago, which allowed the city to use, the district to use cash in lieu payments for off-street parking for alternative transportation infrastructure. So it essentially creates easier use of those funds if council should wish to do that. The other administrative issue that the bylaw resolves is the requirement under the previous bylaws that each reserve account have its own specific bank account attached to that. So that requirement is being eliminated in the draft bylaw. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Are there Councillor Ney?
Thank you very much. This is nice to see this all separated out. Thank you very much. The question I have is, I was just wondering if you could help me understand. I thought we had an uplands reserve thing, and I didn't see that here. Is it somehow, where is that now?
Councillor Ney, you're referring to the upland sewage separation, is that? Okay. Mr. Payne?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I'll distinguish between a couple things here: reserve funds and reserves. Reserve funds are typically statutory funds, which have an external requirement for us to keep a separate reserve for it. Reserves are simple allocations of funds that aren't necessarily outwardly reported. I will mention, however, though, that the reserve balances and the reserve fund balances will be transparently reported in the next financial plan, so council will have a very clear perspective on that. But to answer your specific question, yes, we have a gas tax deferred revenue funding source. It doesn't need to be in a bylaw.
Just one other question. We used to talk about an infrastructure reserve. Is that a reserve and not a reserve fund as well, or?
Mr. Payne?
Thank you, through your worship. Correct. It's a reserve essentially established by council approval of the financial plan. So no, it doesn't exist in a bylaw. It can be formalized in the bylaw if it's council's prerogative. Right now, it's just a standalone allocation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Councillor Zelka?
Thank you, Chair. And my question may be in a similar vein. I've heard rumor that a previous incarnation of the Environmental Action Committee, whatever it was called before my time, there was some sort of a carbon fund or sort of carbon credit fund. I don't know whether it was reserve funds or something that fits in here, but it seemed to be sort of flowing out there. And if I recall correctly, the mayor happened to be the chair at the time. So maybe it would be to the director of finance, or possibly to the mayor himself, to find out what the name of this fund is and whether the funds are available, things like that.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Some of that funding was actually used recently, but it is a separate fund. It was funded not through the Environmental Advisory Committee, but just with one of the previous directors of finance, myself and a number of other representatives sat down and came up with a way of essentially appointing our carbon offsets to a fund. I believe that fund still exists, but it would not be a bylaw related piece. Mr. Payne, are you familiar with the fund?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. You're absolutely correct. It's called the Climate Action Reserve. It's a separate allocation, not by bylaw, and it is funded by our CARIP incentive rebates.
And that follow-up question related to that. So that wouldn't be part of this reserve fund. That would just be another bank account, another, I guess, a chart of account item.
Through your worship, precisely, and it will be reported. It will be reported transparently in the financial plan.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Any other questions? Councillor Patterson?
Just to follow up, if I may, on that infrastructure renewal that went into the 2018 annual report, and then will kind of disappear with this. For continuity, then will you? I'm wondering if that'll be captured somehow in notes or whatever way, just so that it doesn't look like it's gone.
Mr. Payne?
Thank you, Your Worship. There seems to be a common theme with a lot of these questions, and I think the reporting on our reserve funds and their balances is eminently important, and absolutely that will be reported. The format that I have proposed in the draft bylaw, and you're spoiling all the surprises, is you will have a listing of all the reserves, the beginning balance, all transfers in, all transfers out, the ending balance, projections for 5 years, descriptions of all of those reserves.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. I believe the council term for that is hallelujah. So thank you for Councillor Patterson. No, good. Thank you. That's fine. I have one suggestion, but I'll make it as part of our process of reviewing the approval process. We have, and if there's no more questions, we can get to a motion, and then we can get to first, second, third read. Oh, Mr. Payne, before I take a motion, Mr. Payne had his hand up, so I'll give him prerogative.
Sorry, Your Worship. I just occurred to me that it might be appropriate to answer one of the member of public's questions regarding interest in the previous bylaw. Worth noting that under the previous legislation, interest earned on a reserve could be used for alternate purposes, but that's not the case on the community charter. So any interest earned in a reserve must be used for the purpose of that reserve.
Okay, good to know. Thank you very much for that. Okay, now we'll take a motion.
I believe the motion is that council will give first and second readings to the draft reserve bylaw 2020.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? I'm just going to raise this as and maybe if people are amenable, we just have a motion to make this very small change as part of this is the appropriate place at the second reading. This is something that's bugged me for a very long time because it causes confusion constantly, is that our Heritage Reserve Fund is called the Heritage Reserve Fund. And in fact, and people often think it's to be used for heritage purposes. And it is it is written into the bylaw that it can't be. So I was just thinking perhaps someone would be interested in moving that we change the name to a Heritage Land Development Reserve Fund, which reflects the land development limitations of that fund, and but keeps the fact that it's a heritage. So it's a suggestion. If nobody on council wishes to make that, we will leave it alone and keep it the current name.
Is that a motion?
It would. I'm not going to make a motion. If a member of council feels it's worth changing the name of that fund, we can do so at this point. If not, we'll just move forward with it as it is. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor. Perhaps rather than just renaming it, it may require a more clarified detail as to what the monies that are in the fund could actually be used for. I know that certainly because of Mr. Payne has gone to all of the effort to put all of this forward, certainly members of the Heritage Commission and Foundation reading the agenda thought, wow, the Heritage has a great deal of money that could be utilized, and they're thinking of many ways. And so I think perhaps at least if there could be greater clarity of the purposes for which the fund can be used would be helpful.
Mr. Payne, do you want to explain what the Heritage Fund is? If not, I'm happy to give a little history lesson on this one.
Your Worship, perhaps council could benefit from the history that you could provide, because I would just read the purposes that are outlined in the reserve bylaw, and that's really the only limitations that staff would interpret should they be requested to use those funds. I'm happy to read those purposes, Your Worship, or would you prefer to?
You can read the purposes if you. That would be helpful, I think, for people to understand.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship, and keep in mind that this terminology is retained in the draft bylaw as well, so it's identical. So the money placed to the credit of the Heritage Reserve Fund on the date of adoption of this bylaw, and the proceeds from such future land sales, development projects, and other capital investments may be placed to the credit of this reserve. Pardon me. I think. Pardon me. So here's the purpose. Those required for the purpose land development projects and other capital investments designed to augment the net present value of the principal. So land development projects, essentially.
In fact, it's very specific to land development. And where this came from was that the municipality sold the old dairy lands up by on Cedar Hill Crossroads, used that money to purchase a chunk of land beside Camosun College, subdivided that land, resold the land, and used the profits of that to fund this reserve fund. It was called the Heritage Reserve Fund, I believe, just because it was the heritage of that process, and used for other similar type future land developments, which I believe we've seen a total of 0 since that happened, and it's been sitting there. And I don't have an objection to the restrictions until this body may consider future use. But the heritage term confuses people constantly. They're always looking at this thinking it's money allocated for heritage, and it's by statute not allowed to be used for heritage. It's for land development. So hence my suggestion that we might change the name to a Heritage Land Development Reserve Fund, if that's the will of council. Councillor Braithwaite?
So I would make that motion that we change the name of it to Heritage Land Development Fund.
Second.
Reserve Fund.
Reserve Fund, sorry.
Moved and seconded. Mr. I'm just looking at staff, looking uncomfortably at each other. I do not want to cause discomfort, so if I...
Just if I may, Your Worship, throughout the bylaw itself has a Heritage Reserve Fund throughout the bylaw, so we're just kind of discussing whether or not having that name of the bylaw within the bylaw and then changing the name of the thing has any implications. So.
Your Worship, if we were to change the name of the reserve fund, it would be done by amending Section 4, Subsection A, which identifies the name of that. Subsection C refers to the previous reserve fund, which would still be okay. So it would retain the Heritage Fund title from the previous bylaw in Subsection C. Subsection A would be amended.
I don't want to cause problems if that's going to cause problems. Is that an acceptable process? Okay, that's okay. I couldn't interpret that, whether that was a look of okay or a look of worry. So we have a motion on the table and to do that. Is there any other discussion? Okay, we'll call the question then. So this is a motion to amend the wording, the name of that reserve fund is on the table. I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Okay, so we're back to we're now at completing of second reading. We're at actually no, we have first and second reading. We've had the amendment, so we have. Are there any other changes or on second reading? Seeing none, then I will call the question on second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. And then third reading.
I'll move that council give third reading to the draft reserve funds bylaw 2020.
And second.
Seconded. We don't usually debate third reading, so I'll just call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you. And that will come back to a future council meeting for adoption. We're now on to the last item before adjournment, which is the Animal Control Bylaw 2019. And I'm just going to, there's some additional information on your desks in front of you. But Ms. Varela, do you want to just give a quick explanation of what this looks like?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this actually came out of a request from a member of the public who has a guide dog and another companion dog. And the guide dog is being transitioned from active service and she needs to bring on another guide dog to assist with that transition. So that would actually leave her with 3 dogs. Staff doesn't have time to do a full review of the animal control bylaw. So we were suggesting that we just create the category of guide dogs as an exemption to the existing animal control bylaw. Since that time, we had the suggestion that perhaps we should expand that to include service dogs. When we look to the Act of the province, they actually do differentiate between guide and service dogs. So staff are proposing that the exemption be for guide and service dogs, and that we add a definition for guide and service dog into that bylaw. Both of those are on your dais for easy reference.
So procedurally, we have a motion here and with a specific bylaw in front of us. So procedurally, would we do first and second reading if people, and then take a motion to amend to include those terms and the definitions? Is that the cleanest way of doing it, Ms. Hopkins?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay. So why don't we get the first and second reading on the table, then we can have a debate. Is there someone willing to make the recommended motion? Which should just be first and second reading of bylaw 4748.
I'll move first and second reading of bylaw 4748, Animal Control Amendment Bylaw 2019.
Is there a seconder? Is this
Second.
2019 or 2020? Yeah, it should be
2020, I meant.
Okay. Thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. So this is the point if council wishes to amend it to include the term service dog and add the definitions as laid out on our typed report in front of us. Ms. Hopkins?
Your Worship, council should give first reading and then make the amendments at second.
I haven't called the question at second. So you want me to call?
So we should split the readings up so that we give first reading and then we make a motion for second and make any amendments from there.
So, fair enough. So procedurally, my apologies. I didn't realize. Is it easiest just to ask the mover and seconder to withdraw their motions and start again? Is that the simplest, cleanest process?
Your Worship, that would be fine.
With the mover and the seconder willing
Withdraw.
to withdraw? Yes,
Second.
seeing that agreement. So we'll go back. If I could ask the same mover and seconder to move first reading of the same bylaw.
I'll move first reading of bylaw 4748, Animal Control Amendment Bylaw 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. We don't debate this. We're just going to have a vote on it. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. And now we have, do you wish to have the motion to amend first or have the motion on the table for second reading and then make a motion to amend? Ms. Hopkins?
Your Worship, you can move second and then make the amendments.
Okay, perfect. That's how my preference as well. So I have a mover for a second.
I'll move second reading of bylaw 4748, Animal Control Amendment Bylaw 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. At this point, I'll try this again. If someone's willing to make the a motion to amend, then we can have that discussion as well. And if not, we'll just move forward with it as written.
And I'm just wondering what amendment I'm making here. I'm going to move that we amend.
Before you make the motion,
bylaw.
how about we just get clarification to make sure? The motion should be to amend to include the term guide dogs and include the definitions as, and insert the definitions. Is that a clean enough motion? Okay.
Yes, Your Worship.
So I'll move that we amend the bylaw to include guide dog and service dog and their definitions.
Perfect. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Same seconder. Thank you very much. Is there any discussion on these additions? Councillor Braithwaite, you moved it. Go ahead.
Just wondering, do people have to show, through you, Mayor, to staff, do people have to show their certifications for a guide dog to be able to be allowed to include that guide dog as their third dog in their house?
Ms. Varela?
I haven't actually played this out. Animal control is actually contracted through Victoria, which is why we have to ensure the bylaw and practice are aligned. So staff can undertake that procedural assessment, and I can provide council with an informal update later if you'd like.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, it's Victoria Animal Control Services, which is a independent, not actually the City of Victoria. Yeah. Councillor Patterson.
Just for clarification, because I did attend the provincial workshop on accessibility, and this was quite a discussion item of the terminology for the dogs, and this, they do have to go through certification and decertification in that process. So I think that, yes, they would have to show both of those certificates and show that the decertified dog is still an animal that is in good standing. I know there's a lot of movement around the wording of legislation with respect to that, because members did state that, who attended, stated that it was very unlikely that a retired service dog or guide dog would all of a sudden become a bad behavior animal.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted some clarification from staff on two items. The first is we're accepting guide dogs, and I presume also accepting service dogs in this in the animal control bylaw, which means there's no limit on those, but there would still continue to be a two dog limit on any other types of dogs. Yes.
Councillor Zelka, Ms. Varela.
Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you. And the second question is, I noticed in my day job at Emergency Management British Columbia that they have a service dog that comes to visit to help with, just helping out with people's process. Would this bylaw amendment also allow, for example, our fire chief to house a guide or a service dog in the fire hall, which I guess would be the premises of that service dog going forward?
As a hypothetical? Sure.
All right, we have the motion to amend on the table. So the motion right now is just the amendment motion, which is to add the definitions and the guide and service dog. So any other discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. So we're back to the main motion of second reading as amended. And we will, if I can, that's live currently. Any other discussion? I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Then we'll have third reading, please.
I'll move third reading of Bylaw 4748, Animal Control Amendment Bylaw 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Generally no discussion unless anybody sticks up their hand urgently. Nope. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Just need a motion to adjourn.
Move adjournment.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you very much. And this was a good example of how diverse our council decision making is between animal control bylaws and reserves and financial planning and land use. It's always an interesting day in the chambers. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you on. Yeah, thank you.